Well, hi y'all. My name is Bill Whitehill, and it is my honor and pleasure to serve you as a justice on the Texas Judiciary Court of Appeals. We'll talk a little bit about our court and what we do a little bit later on. But this is such an incredibly wonderful and unique opportunity to have representatives of three levels of our judiciary in the state of Texas, and we'll talk about how the court is structured first, and then I want to talk a little bit about where we are in these judicial races in Texas right now and the threat that is facing us. Okay, so in Texas, we have three levels. We have trial courts, and you see those things on TV with very basic moments and all that exciting, sexy stuff. And that's great. They're very valuable. They decide the cases between the parties that come to us. And then we have intermediate appellate courts, right? So everybody here's heard of the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans, right? Yeah. That's not us, okay? But we do the same type of thing here in the state of Texas. We're an intermediate appellate court. And Texas is truly unique in many, many ways, but especially that we have two high courts, right? We essentially have two Supreme Courts, and we're the only state that is structured exactly the way we are. We have a Texas Supreme Court, which is the Supreme Court for all civil cases, and we have the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which is the Supreme Court for all criminal cases. Oklahoma is kind of close, but they don't really do as well as we do. And that usually happens the second Saturday in October as well, but that's another story. For those that are football fans. So a little bit of factual information, just data points about how the courts affect everybody's lives. Trial courts in the state of Texas, on average, in a non-COVID year, are going to, at the municipal court and the Justice of the Peace Court level, handle roughly 8 million cases a year. Right? So roughly a third of the state population, at least at that level, is going to come in contact with the judicial system. And it's really, really, I got a chart right here. Brett's anxious to talk about this chart. You can find it on the Texas Supreme Court website. I think you can find it on my website, which, by the way, happens to be guardianforjustice.com. They handed it out. Oh, they handed it out? Okay, great. Well, that's why he's waiting here. Great. We coordinate so well between our different courts. All right? So 8 million people are going to go through justice courts and municipal courts a year. Roughly 79,000 cases are going to be disposed of in district or county courts, the basic trial courts in the state of Texas. It's an amazing number of cases. There are 14 intermediate appellate courts in the state of Texas. A little historical note, there are 2 of them in Houston, the first and 14th, and their number order, how they were created. The first was actually created in Galveston, back when Galveston was the New York City west of the Mississippi River, and after 1900, for some reason, got moved to Houston. The appellate courts in the state of Texas in a non-COVID year are going to dispose of roughly 10,000 cases every year. That's a lot of appeals. That's a lot of briefs. The Fifth Court, our court, is going to dispose of roughly 2,000 of those cases every year. So 20% of all appeals in the state of Texas come through our court. We have a huge, huge impact. Of those 2,000 cases each year, we're going to, just under 1,000 of them, we're going to have substantive opinions disposing of the cases. I learned today that in the 5 3/4 years I've been on the court, I have signed over 594 majority opinions. 15 dissents. For some reason, that number has shot up the last few years. I don't know why. Yeah, we had a little event 2 years ago in the judicial races. Okay, you all are going to write roughly 100, your court's going to write roughly 100 opinions a year, but how many cases on the Court of Criminal Appeals you're going to dispose of? Thousands.
It's about anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000.
Yeah. In the Supreme Court with your petitions for review.
About 1,000 petitions a year.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff is going on. All right, so we have been blessed for a really long time in Texas to have a conservative judiciary that is committed to protecting and preserving the rule of law, and the benefits of the state of Texas have been bountiful, right? Businesses, back in the 1980s, it was a different story. There was a story on 60 Minutes about justice for sale, and I remember, there were certain parts of Texas you just didn't want to try a case in if you were a defendant, right? It was very difficult. But beginning in the late 80s, Republicans started winning judicial races and things changed. We've got a conservative judiciary, and that doesn't mean that we're biased for or against one side or the other. It's just that we follow the rule of law, and we didn't put our thumbs on the scale, right? But we know when we watch the news, if we're still watching the news, that today, freedom and liberty in this country are under attack in ways they haven't been under attack in over 100 years. And I'm here to tell you that justice and the justice system is under attack too, right? We have seen in the news trying to burn down a federal courthouse up in the Northwest. When you attack the courthouse, you're attacking justice, you're attacking the justice system, you're attacking the rule of law. We saw this happening here in Dallas earlier this summer, our courthouse, 600 Commerce Street. You can go down there and see the plywood covering the windows, where they broke out windows in our courthouse here in Dallas County. Justice was under attack in Dallas County. And they have a plan to try to take over the court system and go back to the 1980s, right? And I want to share with you an email I received yesterday. I don't know why they sent me this email. I promise you, I'm not only am I a Republican, but I'm a very conservative one at that. But Judge Amy Clark Meacham, who's running for the Supreme Court against our Chief Justice, Nathan Heck, sent out an email touting recent polls where she claims, we don't trust polls, but she claims that she's in a dead even heat, 42-42, with our Chief Justice, Nathan Heck. And I want to read to you some of these things that she said in her email. If you want to help restore fairness to the Texas Supreme Court, join Judge Amy Clark. Well, restore fairness to the Texas Supreme Court. I sometimes disagree with them, usually when they disagree with me, but I think they're fair. And I think it's offensive to say that our Texas Supreme Court is not fair. But it gets worse. It gets worse. As poll after poll shows, we are so close to electing ethical judges, up and down the ballot. Let's just stop right there. We're not ethical judges. She's saying up and down the ballot, Republican judges are unethical. That's a pretty bold statement. But it gets worse. We're going to elect ethical judges up and down the ballot who will create a more fair and just society, where every Texan is afforded equal justice under the law. Okay? They want to fundamentally transform the judicial system. And we have some recent history with what happens with this fundamentally transform idea, right? They are coming after the judicial system. They want to fundamentally transform it to something they like better, where they, judges, not the legislature, get to impose what they think is a fair and just society. Now, an example of back in the 1980s, there was a case called Melody Home Manufacturing versus Barnes, where the Supreme Court, a newly elected Democrats majority Supreme Court, decided just after 2 years they were going to go 180 degrees and reverse an opinion out of that court that established precedent, established law. And when one of the other judges on the court said, well, I agree with the result, but we don't need to say exactly what we said. We don't need to go as far as what we go. We can get there under the existing law. Another judge on the court said, well, one of the judges asked how this case is any different from the opinion we're now returning. And the answer to that question is that the makeup of this court has changed. Right? The people speaking through the elective process have constituted a new majority in this court. Right? So we've got a new majority, we need to change the rules. Right? And this is the statement that I think is really, really important. We must be willing to expand or limit the law, dependent upon the perceived ills of a changing society. What? Okay? That's that's kind of scary, but that's what they believe. And they believe that it's the court's role to make the law according to how they view to address the perceived ills of a changing society. And they want to transform our judiciary to go back to that. Okay, enough of Bill talking about that. Let's get on to the people you really want to hear from. First, we're going to hear from a panel of our district court judge candidates and judge. And we have another candidate, Mike Lee, who couldn't be here today, but he said to say hello. So if you all will come on up here, grab a name badge as you go by, and set it up in front of you. And actually, the other two, I'd like to go first. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on them, and then we'll let them fill in what else. And then I want them to talk about what their courts do, why the courts are important to you every day, how they fit into the rule of law. The first judge I want to introduce is Ashley Wysocki, the presiding judge of the 254th District Court, Family Court Bench. It's a really important bench. She was appointed governor by Governor Abbott in January of 2019, is up for election. Prior to taking the bench, she practiced in the areas of family law, civil litigation, commercial litigation for over 10 years. She holds an MBA as well as a JD. This is a really important, impressive part. She does all that while she's a mother of 3 children. And her husband is a well-known family lawyer in Canada. That's true, he is a well-known family lawyer in Canada. Judge Wysocki is dedicated to following the rule of law and providing the consistency for families of Dallas County.
Hello, everyone, and it's so good to see you. Use the microphone. Let's see if this is better. Hear me better? Okay. I said hello, everyone. It's so good to see you, and it's wonderful to be in this beautiful museum. I can't imagine a better place for us to meet, quite frankly. For you, when you think about what it means and how a judge can affect your life, I would venture to guess that each of you knows at least 3 people who have gone through a divorce or been in the courts in regards to child custody or adoption. These are the type of things in a family court that literally touch people's lives every day in our society. And what has happened in Dallas County over the past few years, and one of the things that's so important for us to have conservative, fair-minded judges come in to try to repair is that our courts have gotten a little bit out of control because we have judges, just like what Justice Whitehill was discussing, who no longer believe that, especially in a family law context, that there is a law that you have to follow. They believe that they can do whatever they want. And what that does for the families of Dallas County is, number one, it gives them instability because they're going through a process that is probably the most difficult process that they're going to face in most of their lives. It's something that, especially when a family and a marriage is ending, is going to be very difficult, and it's going to change everything moving forward. And when we talk about children, that affects their lives moving forward. And when those families don't know what a judge is likely to do, because it doesn't really matter what's in the law books, what matters is how that person is feeling that day, or which attorney they like, or which party maybe looks better that day. Those type of things that can affect a decision that shouldn't affect a judge's decision. Those are controlling for these families who are coming in. So then you have no idea how you can make a better choice in your case going forward because you don't know what the judge is likely to do. So what I have tried to do since I've taken the bench, and I believe I have been successful at it, is provide consistency because the attorneys and the parties know that they may not like the law, but I know what the law is, and I am going to follow the law as the best of my ability, applying the facts that they give me. So the attorneys can adequately advise their clients. Here is what is likely going to happen when you get there. That gives each person the ability And that's how best that we can protect our judiciary, and especially in the family law context, when you have judges who are faithful to the law, who believe that it is not our job to be rewriting it, that is the job of the legislature that we put in place based on the will of the people, and that it is their job to listen to you, and when they create those laws, it is our job to look at the law, to apply it, and to make the best decisions that we can, taking out bias, taking out politics. And I probably have gone over my time. I do want to say one more thing, because I do think this is important for this group, is one of the things that you have done so wonderful at is donating to and helping our child protection and permanency court, which is a new court that handles the youth that have been put into the system, and the state has become essentially their managing conservator. After they're done with my court, they then go to this special court. So Dallas County is one of the only counties in Texas that has it. I have 6 other district judges, family law judges, that are essentially equal to me. Only one other refers their cases to that special court that Dallas County has. Ego, lack of understanding of what's going on, and quite frankly, I can't even tell you the other reasons why you wouldn't take an amazing resource that we have and do that for these children. But it is so important, because I know your club has done wonderful things in supporting that court, and I want to thank you for it, and thank you for the youth in Dallas County for doing that for them, because it is so important.
We'll have time for some questions, and I've got a couple questions. You didn't know, right? Have fun. Tell them some of the different types of decisions you have to make. Of course, there's property division and a divorce, but decisions that affect parent-child relationships. And we'll combine 2 questions here. They're all, let's just talk about that first, and we'll come back to the next question.
Sure. In family courts in Dallas, I'm primarily dealing, of course, with divorce, like you talked about, but also with suits affecting the parent-child relationship, where when you think of maybe things like custody, we think in terms of conservatorship, possession and access, which parent gets rights and duties and decision-making abilities. I make decisions on child support. I make decisions for protection of individuals in protective orders when there's been family violence. I also get to hear enforcement, which are quasi-criminal actions relating to someone failing to follow my orders. And that includes failing to pay child support would be the big one that you've probably heard about. But I also make interpretation of premarital agreements, post-marital agreements in the divorce aspect as well.
Okay, actually, everybody here loves watching the law dramas and the juries out there, and it's all exciting, and you're waiting out the jury. What percentage of the cases that you resolve actually involve jury trials, and what percentage do you get to make the final call?
So very, very few family cases in my court come to a jury trial. I would say that in Dallas County, I think the number per court depends on your judge. Because like I had a mediator tell me, she said, you're terrible for business because people don't care about me solving their case because they're okay coming to you to solve it. Some of the other courts, they're not willing to go in front of that judge to make a decision, and I think that does happen with jury trials as well. I have, since taking the bench, only had 1 jury trial. I've had more set, and most of the time they settle.
Right, and what I'm getting at is just across the board in family courts, so many of the decisions that are made are not jury trials. They're not jury trials. Most of them are not. And so that gives a whole lot of power, if you will, to the family law judges. And you need to make sure that you have people in these courts that don't abuse that power, that take it seriously, and respect the law and respect the power that they have. As an aside, when a trial judge makes a decision in one of these cases and it comes up for us to review, it's a very difficult standard of review to turn around. It's typically an abuse of discretion standard, and what that means is, could any reasonable trial judge have somehow reached this conclusion based upon these facts? And so that gives them so much power to make decisions one way or the other that we really have very little ability to review. And so it's just really, really important that we have good judges. Okay. Jessica and Jordan are not yet on the bench. They hopefully will be soon. But let me give you a little bit of background information. Jessica Boyce Lewis is an attorney running for the 14th District Court of Texas. First thing I want you to talk about is who your opponent is, but we'll get to that. A civil district court in Dallas County, Jessica describes herself as a Christ follower, wife, mother, conservative, and advocate for Dallas communities. Born and raised in Texas, Jessica has lived in Dallas for almost 15 years. She attended SMU's Denton School of Law, some of the best lawyers around. And began her legal career at Baker Botts. I think y'all probably heard of that firm, a small firm, been around pretty long. Working on complex bankruptcy and litigation matters for clients in various businesses and industries. In 2014, Jessica transitioned full-time to Dallas-based nonprofit Advocates for Community Transformation, where she represented residents of high-crime neighborhoods against owners of problem properties and civil litigation and probate-related matters. Throughout her career, Jessica has supported and volunteered with dozens of organizations with focus areas ranging from care for the homeless to anti-trafficking. Tell us why you're running for this position.
Thank you, Justice. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. As Justice Whitehill said, I'm Jessica Lewis, and I'm running for the 14th Judicial District, or which is Civil District Court, a countywide race. And as Justice Whitehill alluded to, my opponent is Judge Eric Moyer, who recently has come into some recent fame related to a previous panel we've had, so don't need to go into that. And that is not why I'm running. Oh, can you not hear me? Okay, I'll really choke up on it. Sorry, it feels so weird. It's like I feel it on yeah. All right. In terms of why I'm running, it's something that if I, just to be clear, if I was to have talked to you this time last year, I would not have forecasted that I would be on this panel or behind this table. This is something that I think needs to be done, and it's not about me. It's about us in this room. It's about our community. And I definitely would not have thought that my husband would be sitting here next to me. I know it looks like to me, I'm like, is this some kind of publicity stunt? Is this something, like, what is going on? But thankfully, we married each other and we're very much aligned in all of these things. And back in 2018, when we reached the end of our ballot and saw that over a dozen races, judicial races, were just not contested at all. There was no one with the R next to their name. We, as attorneys, as Christians, as conservatives, were wondering what went wrong. Where are the people, the seasoned, wise people that are stepping up in Dallas County? Are we just writing it off? Do we not care about Dallas County? And so we set out to try to find people that would maybe step into this place, and ultimately felt led to do it ourselves. And though we will stand behind again more people that maybe would step up in 2022 when over a dozen people will be up again for races at that time. So again, it's not about me, it's about us. Justice Whitehill read off Justice Heck's opponent's email.
Yes.
And there were some points in there that, while I don't think that they are applicable to the Texas Supreme Court or our 5th District Court of Appeals, I do think might be applicable for our Dallas County courts. I do think that there's some transformation that needs to happen because of transformation that has already happened. And I think that we need to get back in the game here. The way our system works, it requires people to step up and run for these elections to be on in the courts. And so I think that our Dallas County courts do need some of that transformation brings us to a place of justice, impartiality, constitutional focus, the idea of looking at the rule of law and saying that no one should walk into the court with their case pre-decided. And I've talked to many people who feel that that is the current state.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And so I'm here to spread that message that has been discussed so far, that the races matter. So many people are going to be before the court. You might not want to be, you might not be planning on it, but if you're before the court, you want to come in knowing that there's nothing that has already tipped the scales against you. And if it was me, I also would want something to be tipped for me walking in the courtroom. I would want to know that our courts are fair, just, and balanced.
Jessica, your biography mentions some of your community-focused work, which is amazing. But full-time and otherwise, how do you think that work relates to your seeking this office?
Yes, just as I have had the opportunity to I would say my whole journey leading me to this point, I think has equipped me for this race, to bring that impartiality, to bring that perspective to the court, both inside and out. Someone serving in the judicial role should be a judge for the community. I originally grew up in East Texas. I was not in any way grew up in luxury. It was very much the opposite. I've been grateful for everything that I had growing up, and thankfully I did have a family that built around me a spirit of hope. And that led me from a time where, was on free lunch program, all, thrift store clothes, all the way to a point where I'm at this international law firm. And I believe that the Lord was just pushed every single part of that way. But at the height of where I was there, I'd been volunteering for several years with this group called ACT. And at the height of what I was doing at the firm, I felt called to say goodbye to that and get into our communities and represent residents of high crime neighborhoods in Dallas. And that gave me an opportunity to better understand our communities here in Dallas. Some of the historical lines and divisions that we have that we need to break down. I don't know if any of you were here when Trey Penny was here sharing a few months ago. He was saying, why aren't Republicans in all areas of Dallas? And we should be. And I'm someone who served in all of those areas, and I believe that I have a heart for those areas, and I know that. But I also believe that I can be that judge for all Dallas communities, not anyone particularly, no one just because based on the power, influence, or the position that they're in, but for all Dallas residents.
If you could share one message with the voters of Dallas County, what would that be?
I would say that, as I mentioned, it's not about me, it's about us, and in that, I need your support though, because I've been willing to step up. My husband and I really have dedicated so much of our life this year, and a crazy year it has been for all of us, that to this effort, because we believe that we need champions, and we didn't see one there, so we became that. And we want to be that for all of you, for everyone in Dallas, because we believe that Dallas deserves better in that. And so we would just ask for your support for my campaign. If everyone in here donated $25, $50, we would make more videos. We've got one we're making tomorrow. We would make more signs. We've got those that we can connect you with and give you. If you just make a mere 2,000 calls, or 20 calls or 50 calls, those things, they add up. And so I really need your support. I've got in the back a card here that gives just a little 1, 2, 3 about why I'm running. It gives the information on how you get connected to the campaign, and ultimately get to the point of what my tagline is, that I believe was divinely inspired.
After his term, he practiced in Dallas with Cavazos, Hendricks, Poirot, in PCRW. He's a great guy. Arnie Cavazos, good friend. Since 2018, Jordan has worked as an in-house counsel and Texas area president for First Guaranty Bank. He earned a BA in English from LSU, Go Tigers, an MBA from Southeastern Louisiana University, and a JD from SMU Devon School of Law. He has actively served with numerous nonprofits and causes in Dallas County since 2010, including as a board member for both Christians Engaged, New Friends, and New Life Men's Advocacy Group. Jordan and Jessica and children are active members of Watermark Community Church. You haven't heard about children. Tell us a little bit about children before we start.
So we have a 11-year-old, a 7-year-old, sorry, an 8-year-old. She just turned 8. A 3-year-old who thinks she's 12, and a 1-year-old who is.
I think she's 16.
Thank you, Justice. You know, I wanted to focus on something you said earlier about just this concept of dissent. And you said more recently you've been inclined to do so more often. And I want you to think about what that dissent, a tiny little word, means at the beginning of it. Maybe it's not you, maybe it's a neighbor. As a lawyer, I tried to always practice as the type of lawyer that I wanted to be, that I emulated out of an idea of what a lawyer should be. It was nothing like what most lawyers are actually like. But it was more like an Atticus Finch. It was more of a very straightforward lawyer who knew the law. It was Nancy Drew's dad, if any of you read Nancy Drew. But it was someone you could always rely upon to do the right thing. And he knew the law, and he would advise others in it, and he could take the side of justice. Because the people around him for whom he was taking the side of justice were members of the community, were all the members of the community. No matter who they were members of his community, and they deserved impartiality, justice. Sometimes they deserved compassion. Sometimes they deserved something else. But at the end of the day, you knew exactly where he lied and who he was. So you have a neighbor who's been harmed. Let's just give an example. And let's say they've been defrauded. That's a great term. Everyone kind of has an idea of what that means. They've been defrauded, and as a result, they've lost everything. Their children, they can't even see their children anymore. They've lost their source of income. They've lost everything that they've saved up all their life. Maybe they are like me, and they came from nothing, and they fought all their life. I was homeless as a child for a period of time. I was destitute for a period of time. My mother was a single mother for a period of time. And then, thank God, he raised us out of that. By the time that I had to pay for my own way through college, I finally was able to achieve things and become something else in life than where I started. Thank goodness for this country. Thank goodness that God has blessed us with the freedom and opportunity that we have. What I'm talking to you about is about leadership. And leadership in preserving our communities and protecting those people around us. And in preserving what it means to have laws, justice, mercy, integrity, and ethics on the bench. You see, when we have those things on the bench, then they percolate down to our communities, to our bar. They support and uphold our enforcement officers. And they do so, they make sure to enforce it for those who are not overreaching. Because guess what? They also enforce the liberties of our constitutions, not just the U.S., but also our Texas Constitution and Bill of Rights. I'm thankful for those. But imagine again that your neighbor is harmed, and he or she has lost everything. Their family has been destroyed, and they have spent their life building that thing up. It is their life story and work, and they are harmed. And you want justice for them. You know what the law is. If you're a lawyer like me, you know what the law is. You know that they should be restored. You know that there's someone out there who has the capacity to pay. That's not always true. But you could get justice under the law. But then you go to court, and someone has decided that there's some other sense of the word justice that needs to be practiced at that bench. That they have saved up all their life and all their legal education in order to reinterpret what the law says in a way in which the people who wrote the law, devising justice, never intended for it to be applied. And your friend, your community member, your neighbor, this child of God has been harmed and can't seek justice. And he spends his money, he seeks out the best, or maybe even people donate their time and energy and they appeal. They take it to the next level. Time has passed. This person has had to make ends meet. Maybe they're homeless at this point. Who knows how they're getting by? Maybe some organization near you, some nonprofit, some church has reached out to them to try to keep them, sustain them during their time of need. And they go to our Court of Appeals, and we've lost the Court of Appeals. And it's full of the same people who can contrive the rule of law to mean what they intended to mean. That is where we find ourselves. We find ourselves looking at YouTube videos of people doing horrendous things in the streets. But the streets are in our courts. And unless we, each and every one of us, stand up where we are and protect our communities, and I'm not talking about being insular and going into some sort of huddle. I'm talking about getting out into the streets, because guess what? Our community is not made up of left and right. It is made up of fathers and mothers and children and people who care very much about what God thinks of them and what they're doing. And if we reach out to them, we can bring them to reason under the idea that there is something higher and better, that they want to build their communities, that they want something to strive for, that they want a second generation that is better than the life they've had. Or maybe they want to protect the thing that they've worked and fought so hard for. Those people are not our enemies. They are our future friends and fighters for freedom. But we have to make the first efforts to go reach them and to remove this veil that is over their hearts and minds, that is trying with every sort of force and great wealth and all sorts of insidious purpose to re-educate them that good is bad, that right is wrong, and that justice is something that is rooted in evil. That is not the truth. Our hearts and minds know it. Our consciences declare it. And all of us can tell the difference when we see it. And so I decided, because when I went in 2018 and saw no one on the ballot, that I could not stand quiet with my law license as a resident of this county and know that one more spot was empty. So I'm asking, my website is Lewis for Dallas, the number 4, hers is FOR, but Lewis, the number 4 Dallas, for support. There are people here who could make a significant change in what people know about this race. About all the races. Guess what? If you have my race, I'm at the bottom, everything else gets built up above it. Our communities are where the battle's actually happening. It's not the battle's won or lost before they walk in there. So I'm asking each and every one of you to stand up and stand with me. Thank you. God bless you.
Okay, the next set is have a challenge. I think, Jordan, we've got some time for some questions. Before we get to that, I just want to say, and Jordan hit on one thing that I think is really important, a lot of things that are really important. Not only in the trial courts are those judges responsible for the disputes between those parties, but what they do collectively and throughout all of their cases has a huge impact on our community. It sets a tone. It sets a perception. And it's so important that we have the tone and perception that rule of law prevails, that justice prevails, regardless of who people are, regardless of who their families are, what color their skin is, what religious background they come from, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But don't just think they decide some case and I'm never going to have a case in their court, so I don't need to worry about it. What they do in their courts every day affects our community every day, for everybody who's here. Questions?
I have a question for every one of the panelists, and I don't know when you want them to answer it, but I'd like to hear a discussion about the appointment and or election of judges.
Well, the system of whether we like our judges, from county court judges, district court judges, all the way up to the top, are elected in partisan races, all right? And up until 2 years ago, Alabama and us were the only two states in the country that did that on a partisan basis. Glad you brought up the point of, nope, that's no longer true. There's only one state that does that anymore, it's Alabama. We got rid of straight ticket voting. But we still elect all of our judges in partisan races. And so the question is, how do we feel about that? And is that a good way, or are there better ways to do it? I'll let them address it. You know, my thoughts on that are, just from personal experience, what we do on the Court of Appeals is very difficult work. You know, work with everybody here that is a judge works really, really hard. But our court is designed for conflict, right? Because we decide cases in panels of 3, and so you got to convince one other person to go with you. And you know, many of these cases are very difficult cases, and so you have to have a good working relationship with people, and sometimes that can be hard. My dear friend Molly Francis, who's no longer on our court, she often says to me, and we disagree more often than we agree, right? And so this notion that we're all some sort of monolithic think block court is just wrong. We are always disagreeing, and it just drives me crazy that there's always this partisan overlay hanging over the discussions, not intentionally necessarily, but you know, we know we're going to run an election, and is somehow something I say going to leak out and become part of a campaign against me, or is this going to become some sort of political issue, and what's going to happen? And that's just wrong, right? We should be focused on the law and what the law is, and so that's one reason, in my view, that I don't think partisan election of judges is a good idea, right? So there are different ways to go about it. In the federal system, everybody's appointed for life, and that's great for the people who are appointed for life. Sometimes they're not always great judges, and there's no real way to get rid of them unless you're Sam Kent, and that's a long story. We'll deal with that later. So there's some benefits to that. There's some drawbacks. There's some benefits to electing judges, because people, right, in Texas we believe in power for people, should have a say in who their judges are. And there are ways to deal with that as well. My personal opinion is I would have a different system. I'm in favor of what's called the Missouri plan, where you have a panel of very select lawyers from around the state that make recommendations to the governor for the courts of appeals and higher, and the governor has to pick from that pool, but they have retention elections. So I don't know if y'all want to address that as well.
Since you'd like to hear from each of us, I agree to the same essential position as Justice Whitehill. I believe that there are problems with partisan election of judges, because I do believe that going through this process, there are so many things that people want to ask me, my opinion on certain matters, and quite frankly, my opinion is, well, it depends on what the law says, and that's what I'm going to follow, because as a judge, my personal opinion, while I do have values that govern who I am as a person and decisions that I make, those personal opinions shouldn't affect the way that I rule on an issue. And so I think that there are things that need to be fixed, and that's one of my concerns with it, as well as campaign contributions. And I know in Dallas County, one of the issues I have with getting campaign contributions is attorneys who aren't willing to help my campaign for fear of contribution if I lose, because Dallas is so blue. And that's a problem that we have, and so I do think that as long as there is, a committee of some sort that does deal with the appointment of the judge in the beginning, and not just power in another section of our government, but a committee, and then there are retention elections or some way that the will of the people can still involve and remove a judge that they're unhappy with.
I know we need to get to the next panel, so I just want to add that they actually asked us these questions in a recent Dallas Morning News survey, and so there's a little bit more fleshed out answer that will be available there as well. I echo much of what Justice Whitehill said and Judge Wysocki mentioned, specifically the retaliation, which just finally add that no system is going to be above corruption. And so that's why it's so difficult. I'm so focused on the integrity of the people that we have in these positions at all levels, because I can think of ways that all of them can go wrong, and I'm sure you can too.
I think one of the benefits of having the governor appoint judges would be that they would probably get better partisan judges in terms of the quality of the lawyers who were selected. But the drawback is simply that you wouldn't know what they really believed about things. And I think we've all seen the examples of having people we thought were representing our values appropriately under the Constitution, and it was like a jack in the box. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, actually, I don't. And so I think that there are benefits to partisan elections, and I would actually say that it has to do with the inappropriate ways that we handle it right now, my opinion, purely, and I have no role in it, is just that we handle speech inappropriately. We actually muzzle what the judges can say, and at the same time, we allow lawyers to donate directly to the campaigns and publicly disclose who donated what to the judges. And so I would suggest or recommend maybe there's some sort of some other way of dealing with the donations of lawyers to judges, and maybe some sort of bipartisan fund or some sort of party fund that was not publicly disclosed necessarily, that wasn't going to be used as a sword by the judge to say, hey, did you donate to my campaign? And I'm not saying that that happens, because I can't make those allegations, but it does feel uncomfortable as a citizen. So.
Okay, great.
Judge Whitehill, can I get one question?
Real quick.
Jessica Lewis, your opponent, Eric Moye, has become the judicial backstop for the runaway train that is the Dallas City Council. Anytime that they want to railroad something through, they violate their own procedure, the procedure being they have to give 30 days notice for a public meeting. And when citizens then sue the city, it goes to Eric Moye, and Eric Moye invariably rules that the people of Dallas have no standing to sue the city of Dallas. This is why we have a city council right now that is trying to defund our police, because there is no judicial oversight. My question to you is, if you get into office, how are you going to correct the damage that Eric Moye has done to this city?
Chris,
This is a final question.
Well, I know that, but there are certain rules of judicial conduct that prevent judges from taking public statements on issues that are likely to come before the courts. This is an issue that could likely come for any of us here, and so I know Jessica would love to answer your question, but she can't.
Okay. Well, so everybody knows this is the most imperative election in Dallas County. We have got to get Moye out of there, because this is, when you ask why is the Dallas City Council doing what they're doing, it's because Eric Moye is the judicial backstop. And I'm telling you something, he is participating in the graft that comes through the Dallas City Council. There is no other way to explain it.
We need to move on.
All right.
A little bit of brief background. Our next panel, right, is David and me. There are three of us up for election on the Texas Judiciary Court of Appeals this time around. Justice David Evans, Justice Browning, who is the newest member of our court, who was recently appointed by the governor to fill a spot created through the tragic, horrific death of our colleague David Bridges. So we're going to kind of work as a moderator, as a team, whatnot, and David, take it away.
So, folks, I can vote. Turn it off.
Okay, so I'm not good. Folks, I can hear you getting restless. I'm going to try to move this a little bit faster for you. And so I'm going to tell you three things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this race. And then I'm going to tell you something more about the court so that you can all understand who are these guys and what do they do, okay? So a little bit about myself. I'm Justice David Evans. In August, I celebrated my 44th anniversary with my one sane wife, woman. And we all celebrated 9/11, that anniversary on that Friday. Well, on 9/10, I celebrated the 1-year anniversary of donating my kidney to Chief Justice Terry White. She is doing great, by the way. In fact, she really, really is doing great. She looks about 10 years younger than she did. And I have recovered. It's taken a long time. There's a reason that they put the top age at 65, because it just knocks the socks out of you when you do it. So now, I came to Dallas. My wife and I came to Dallas because I went to Dallas Theological Seminary. And I still read my Bible every morning in Greek and Hebrew. And then I went to Dallas, and then I went to SMU School of Law. At the time, I sat beside Bob Dedman Jr. It wasn't called SMU Dedman School of Law. And I was editor-in-chief of the Law Journal. I went and got a job at a big firm. And then, so I've been in private practice for 16 years. I've been a judge for 20 years. I'm in my 7th year on the Court of Appeals. There's some complexity in there, which we can discuss. But the bottom line is I have a long judicial record. I was a trial judge for 13 years, so in my 7th year on the Court of Appeals. So I know what trial judges do from being a lawyer and trying to persuade them. I know what trial judges do from having been a trial judge and having made those decisions, and there are very tough decisions trial judges do. They have a very, very difficult job. And I know what it is to review trial judges on the Court of Appeals, because that's what we do on the Court of Appeals. So let me explain that, all right? So you've heard this last panel, and Judge Wasaki is currently a judge, and Judge Novak is a judge. They're both district judges. There are 4 types of courts that are trial courts. I'm going to talk about 2 of them. There are district courts, that's what Judge Novak, Judge Wasaki are. There are county courts of law, and they are all elected, and they are all trial courts. Some of them are specialized, some of them are general. Tom, you're general, right? Is Tom still here? No. Okay, well, many of the Collin County courts are general. All of this, and he is, yeah, so he does everything, civil, criminal. Now, I do think that Cindy Wheelis does the juvenile, so he doesn't do that. All right, so what happens in a trial court? Because I want you to see this, because people come up and they'll ask me, or they'll ask Bill, or they'll ask our colleagues, so you're a justice. You're a justice of the peace, and you have 6 county justice of the peace? No. Let's talk about this, okay? The trial judges are the county courts and the district courts. They have jury boxes, and juries come in. They have witness stands, and a person is in the witness stand. The lawyers are at the table. The judge is on the bench. It's like what you've seen in the movies and on TV, although that's all kind of fairly fake. You all know that, same as the medical shows. But that's the basic setup. And there are almost no Perry Mason moments where somebody goes, yes, I murdered him. Okay, doesn't happen much. What usually happens is the lawyers are asking the witnesses question, where were you, what did you do, you were at a meeting, you know, who said what to whom, and the contract got formed for the sale of goods, you know, or whatever it is. And then exhibits are introduced. Pieces of paper are still used in the trial court, although now that they're all digitized, they're shown up on cameras for everybody to see, but there are still actually documents. And so what you have is a court reporter there taking this all down on a machine that's a stenographic machine, witnesses testifying, and there are documents, and the court reporter compiles all of that. Okay? And that is testimony and exhibits. The clerk, who is also elected, keeps the record of all of the pleadings. Somebody sues somebody. They do it by filing a petition. They say, I'm suing you for a traffic accident or breach of contract, or it's an indictment in a criminal case. All right? And so it says what the lawsuit's about. And there's a lot of other pleadings, but the clerk keeps the pleadings. Now, you can guess that there's a winner and loser in every case, right? Other than the ones that don't settle, there's a winner and a loser. So trial judges start with 50% of the people not liking what happened, right? I mean, and then many of the plaintiffs who win wanted to get more, so they're still unhappy even though they're a winner. So there's probably a pool of 70, 80% of the people would like to complain about that, all right? Where do they go? They go to the customer complaint desk. which is the Court of Appeals. Okay, that's us. And what do they bring with them? Or send ahead, kind of. What they do is, it's the record of the court reporter. It's a written record. We get it in a digital form, a PDF. You're all familiar with PDFs nowadays. We get a record of the question, answer, you know, the yes, I killed him, you know, that's an answer, okay? We get that, we get the documents, the contracts, you know, that kind of stuff. We get the clerk file. It is another record, and it has what everybody pled. And the lawyers, the one who's complaining the most is the appellant, and they write a brief. It's not brief for lawyers, you know, we all lie to you about that. It's long, okay? But it's called a brief. And they complain, and the complaint goes like this. The trial judge made this error number 1, some ruling. The trial judge made error number 2, some ruling. The trial judge made error number 3, some ruling that they're complaining of. The appellee is supposedly happy, some of them aren't, but most of them are. And they say, no, it was great. It was a sunny day. It was great, you know. The trial judge was wonderful. All the rulings were correct. And they write a brief, which is long, and they say, this ruling was correct for these, this ruling was correct for these, this ruling, and then we have an argument. The lawyers come in, Justice Whitehill, I, Browning, others, there's 13 of us on our court, and we hear them argue about their brief, which is long. I always emphasize, it is long, okay? 50, 60, 70 pages brief, okay? And so we listen to them orally arguing. We are one, I think, Bill, we're one of the highest on oral arguments of all the courts of appeals. I really like oral arguments, and the lawyers like oral arguments, and I like to ask them questions. What about this? What about that? And so we had oral arguments earlier today, so I'm kind of revved up about oral arguments. Zoom these days, okay. So we listen to them argue, we read and study their briefs, we read the record, we research. We have lawyers that assist us in writing because each one of us on the Dallas Court of Appeals, I will write more opinions than the entire Supreme Court this year. One, okay. And there's 13 of us. And there's 14 courts of appeals. So we are inundating these 2 courts you're going to hear from next with opinions. Okay? And so what is it that you are looking for in Court of Appeals justices? Justices who know the constitutions of Texas and the United States, know the statutes, and know what these justices you're going to hear from, justices and judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals and on the Supreme Court, know what they are writing and saying, and who understand this about the system. The trial judges, to use a military metaphor, they're kind of like the privates in the Army. We're kind of like the captains in the Army. And these guys are kind of the generals. Or maybe you could say these are, you know, well, the Supreme Commander would be both constitutions and the statutes, okay? And the key is that we, Court of Appeals justices, are supposed to know and apply the Constitution and statutes as written according to the public meaning of those words when they were, like, adopted the Constitution, passed, such as a statute, or contracts, when they were agreed to. It's really the same principles, almost all of the same. And we need to know what they say, because we have to follow what they say. So the important difference here is, because people look at me and they go, you're saying all of this, sounds like reading the newspaper. What are you guys talking about? That's exactly the point. You want to elect judges who understand that the things that we are interpreting and applying, it's the plain meaning of those, and that is our job. And so we're kind of the intermediate. Now, Bill always calls our court the dark matter of the universe, and he didn't tell you why. We're the unknown, okay? Nobody knows what we do, which is why I wanted to explain this. You know about the big courts, because you actually see more of them, and newspapers write about them. You know about the trial courts, because the trial courts have a tremendous amount of interaction with the public, and nobody knows about the Court of Appeals. There's 14 of us. Every appeal has to come through a Court of Appeals, except death penalty sentences, which go straight to the Court of Criminal Appeals. The intermediate courts of appeals don't handle those. So that's what we do, and we need your vote, and we need you to stop or pause or go slow in the middle of the ballot, because just like we're in the middle of the judicial system, we're in the middle of your ballot. And we need you to go slow and vote for those of us with an R. Vote for Justice David Evans. You can find more about me at justicedavidevans.com. Thank you so much.
Hi, y'all. Like I said earlier, my name is Bill Whitehill, and if you're an active TFRW member, you probably know me better as Kit's husband. Kit's your first vice president, and she just returned from a trip on the Trump bus going around the state of Texas. You know, it's sort of a special night here tonight. I had a great surprise. I met my cousins. They just moved here from California. Distant cousins, but we have a shared ancestor. Google Robert Whitehill Constitution, and you'll learn that our ancestor wrote the first draft of the Bill of Rights. Just a little bit of tidbit of information. Okay, so why are we here? Why is this important? Why is this going to affect your life every single day? Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But are those rights guaranteed? Are we always going to have them? And I'm here to tell you they're not guaranteed. They're not guaranteed unless you have a strong, independent judiciary committed to protecting those rights, committed to the rule of law. I've read a book twice in my life. Well, I've actually read a lot of books. But I've read this particular book twice in my life. It's called The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, a famous Russian dissident. And what he talks about is what happened in the Soviet judicial system. They had a beautiful sounding constitution, but they didn't have an independent judiciary committed to enforcing the rights guaranteed in that constitution. And we saw millions of people go through the gulags, terrorized, punished, murdered. Prior to 1933, the Germans had a strong tradition of an independent judiciary, but something happened in 1933. And the German judiciary lost its bearings and it became an arm of the Hitler regime. It was no longer an independent judiciary. It was committed to doing whatever Hitler wanted to do, and we saw the result of that. 6 million Jewish people were murdered. Millions of other people were murdered. But that's what happens when you don't have a strong independent judiciary committed to these principles. All right? So, Morgan Meyer in the legislature and all the legislature, their job is to come up with a policy, and it's our job to apply it as they wrote it. And that's very important. So we're talking about the rule of law. The rule of law has two components here. One is the notion that the law, the guiding principles, policy apply to everybody, no matter who they are, no matter what family they came from, no matter what their skin color is, no matter what God they worship or choose not to worship. We're treated the same, and that's important for our society to have justice in society. But another aspect of the rule of law is the democratically way we elect our representatives, right? It is their job to come up with the policy, not our job, like some people want to do if they get on the bench. And what happens when you have an activist judge who decides that he or she wants to impose his or her will, as opposed to the legislature's will? Your votes for the legislature, the policy-making organ of our government, vanish. They're taken away. They're destroyed. They no longer exist. Democracy is ruined when you have activist judges imposing their views of policy as opposed to the policy branch of our government. Now, I'll tell you that the Texas legislature has written a statute that governs virtually every aspect of your day-to-day life. City knows about this. It could be the water code, it could be the health and safety code, it could be the occupations code, it could be the business organization, whatever it is, they've written a statute that governs your life. And when Cindy and Morgan are writing these statutes, there are 181 elected members of the legislature whose job it is to come up with this policy, right? And the governor has his or her signature on it. So that's 182 elected officials whose job it is to come up with these guiding principles that are going to control our life. Okay? Now, every case we decide has at least one statute in it. And it's our job to take that statute and interpret it and figure out what the 182 meant, and then apply it to the facts of this case. And we write an opinion that says what we did and why we did it. And in our system, those opinions become the binding precedent that everybody in our area, at least, our 6 counties, has to follow. Our district is 6 counties, 4 million people. It's a population larger than 17 different states. 99% of the time, we're the final word in a case. 99% of the time, we are effectively a Supreme Court for a population greater than 17 different states. And what we say the 182 meant, it counts. Okay? So that's really, really important. I was discussing this with a friend of mine, a former state representative. And I said, John, really, I think our job is at least as important as yours. He goes, no, Bill, you're wrong. No crap. We're just having a discussion. He said it's more important. And when you think about the impact that one Court of Appeals justice has on your life compared to one member of the legislature, it's really, really important. It's really, really important who sits on these benches. Now, we need your help. Right? We run in these races. We need votes, and I'm confident we'll get everybody here's vote. That's great. We love it. We need each of you to bring at least 10 people to vote for us, to go down ballot. We don't have straight ticket voting anymore. So we need your help. And how are you going to help us do it? You're going to get the word out by talking to your friends and neighbors. You're going to hit email lists. These email lists, I can't tell you how incredibly important it is. That you send an email to 10, 20, 30, 40 friends talking about the judicial races and getting them to support us. I greet voters at the polls, and if you're on their list, you get their votes. They've never met you, they don't know anything about you, but if you're on their list, you get your vote. Okay? Social media. When we're getting close to early voting, visit whitehillforjustice.com. Have I mentioned whitehillforjustice.com? Send it out to people you know. Please visit the website. If you like it, pass it out to everybody you know. If you don't, you can just kind of probably forget about it. Social media, please hit it. We've got to have you do it. Also, we've got beautiful yard art. Right? We've got lots of it in the back. Please take yard art with you. Another prop. I like props. I've got some business cards with me somewhere that I want you to take a handful with. And when you go to the grocery store or a restaurant, just hand them out to a friend, a neighbor, somebody that you meet. If they're a voter, just say, here, take this and check out this guy. I appreciate you doing it. It's really helpful. So, I'd love to say a lot more, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to save you from that. Bill Whitehill, whitehillforjustice.com. Appreciate your help. Appreciate your support. Thank you very much. Any questions for David or me before we pass on? No, what not we're going to pass on. Before we pass on. Okay, great. Okay, yeah, Bert's got to be somewhere in about 10 minutes. So we're going to let him. Well, you got it. Yeah. Listen, if you want to go first, you can go by yourself. There's your name.
I'm glad I don't have. Does that work?
Use that.
Thank you, Brett. I'm glad I don't have to call Brett Busby. He clerked in the Supreme Court, and he's an Eagle Scout, and I get to go ahead. He's always so kind. My name is Judge Bert Richardson. I am on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. This is my fourth event of the day. It started at 8 o'clock this morning, and I have one more at 8:30 in Houston. And unfortunately, it's on a Zoom conference. I am qualified to be on the court. I'm a little out of breath because I've been trying to set up a hotspot in some office back there. But let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I was raised in a military family. My wife is on the back row. That great chart that you're looking at about all the courts that even Justice Busby has, my wife did that. I've been a judge for 20 years. Prior to being a judge, I was a state and federal prosecutor in San Antonio. I was a trial and appellate lawyer. I'm qualified for this job. I am board certified in criminal law. I was fortunate to live all over the world as a military dependent, including Holland, Spain, and Argentina. I'm fluent in Spanish. And in 2008, like many Republicans in this county, I found myself getting defeated in Bear County. And I wasn't sure what I would do on January 1st. And so I became a visiting judge for the state of Texas. And over a period of just over 5 years, I worked in 50 counties. I understand how the justice system works in the state. My opponent, who is from Dallas, as well as Judge Erie's opponent and Judge Newell's opponent, they're both from Dallas. I don't think they have any appellate experience. I have that appellate experience that's required for the job. According to her website, she's running for the Texas Supreme Court. That's news to me. But I would be honored to have your support for this race. All three of us are qualified. We're all conservative jurists on the state high court. We handle a wide variety of cases, including death penalty cases, actual innocence claims, and regular appeals that come from the intermediate appellate courts. It's important that you have conservative jurists at this level. Otherwise, you're just going to change all the rules as they see fit. As Judge Geary frequently says, I am mindful of the fact the legislature writes the laws, and my job is to follow those laws. I have been honored to serve as a judge for over 20 years in the state. I was appointed by Governor Bush. I'm going to try to figure out how to do a Zoom conference on my cell phone for the next 15 minutes. If I can succeed and you're still in here, I'll come back and answer any questions you have. Thank you very much for having me.
Justice Busby, David Newell, Judge Newell, Judge Kevin Geary. And aside, we've got two high courts, and for some reason on the Supreme Court they call them justices, they call them judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals, and the standard joke they've heard 5 million times is there's no justice in the Court of Criminal Appeals and there are no judges on the Supreme Court. Yes, I said you've heard 5 million times. I'll skip my introductions and let them tell you a little bit about themselves.
Is it my turn? Sure. All right, well, my name is Kevin Patrick Geary. I'm the judge of your Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, what Judge Richardson just described to you. Our court in Texas is the Supreme Court of our state for criminal cases. The Supreme Court doesn't review our work, and we don't review their work. We work in the same building, however, and sometimes we see each other in the elevator, and when we win elections, we high-five each other. We hope to be able to do that at the end of this election cycle. And so I grew up in Laredo, Texas, so 5th generation Texan, maybe 7th, depending upon how you calculate that. Went to college and law school at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas, and was very fortunate upon my graduation to be invited to serve as a law clerk to a judge on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. And changed the path of my career because I didn't really plan to do appellate or criminal work, but that experience led me in that direction. I left the court and went to work for a private civil law firm where I very quickly found myself doing the work of my firm and also criminal work because of the experience that I did at the court. And 3 years into that term in that civil firm, I realized my heart was telling me I was in the wrong place. So I started looking for a way to do what I really felt called to do and was hired by the Dallas District Attorney's Office at the time, a good man named John Vance, a Republican. And he invited me to work in his appellate division in the DA's office here in Dallas. I also, around that same time in my life, found a very pretty girl that I wanted to have marry me, and she agreed to do so. She is a pediatrician, but she was in training in Houston. So I moved to Houston to marry her and was fortunate to be hired by the Harris County DA's office into their appellate division where I continued that appellate career. Ultimately, we moved when she finished her training to San Antonio, and I did another number of years as an appellate lawyer in the San Antonio Bexar County DA's office. In 2014, there were 3 judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals who decided to announce publicly that they were not going to run for re-election, they were done on the court, but they were going to finish their terms. That means we had open seats on the court. And I think the judges Lewis over here understand what open seats are. That means that nobody's going to be appointed, that somebody's going to run for that office. And so I felt called at that point, having been given by divine providence this career that I had experienced, I thought maybe I should make myself available to the people to be selected to serve on the court. I didn't know whether I was going to win. I didn't know if I was being called to win, but I knew I was being called to run. So I got out and I ran as hard as I could. I left everything on the field, and you Texans selected me to serve on the court. And I've been there now for nearly 6 years. We have 6-year terms on our 2 high courts, on our appellate courts in Texas. Every appellate judge in Texas has 6-year terms. Well, the 6 years are up, and I've got to run for re-election. You know I've told you about my career, so you know I was prepared to do this job on day 1. But my most important qualification for the job is, as Judge Richardson referenced, I know who writes the law, and I know it's not me. And so every day when I go to work, I make sure to have that first principle in front of me when I go to work deciding cases. Our job as appellate judges isn't to be policymakers. It's not to write rules and regulations for everybody to follow. It's to decide the dispute between the parties in front of us according to the laws and the constitutions written and adopted by somebody else. And so as long as we can do that, I think we're doing a good job. JudgeGeary.com is my website. It's super easy to remember, JudgeGeary.com. I've got some materials in the back that you're welcome to take One of the things that I think that it just occurred to me a few days ago that I can tell you that you can do to help all of us if you care to is everybody in here probably has some sort of social media outlet, whether it's email or Facebook. Lots of people are on Facebook and Twitter. If you would be so kind as just at some point in time to take a picture of our cards and put it on your Facebook feed, then when voters go into the booth, they're going to have seen our name before. And you imagine the multiplier effect that this entire room can have if every single person in the room put our names on their Facebook feed. Everybody in Texas is going to see, everybody that you know is going to see our names, and they're not going to be unfamiliar, and they're not going to feel afraid to pick that person because I don't know who that is and I've never heard of them before. They're going to have seen it before. Help us to do that. God bless you.
Defer to the Supreme Court if you want to. That's fine.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Brett Busby, and I was appointed last year by Governor Abbott to the Supreme Court, and I'm running for my first term. I'm a 7th-generation Texan, 3rd-generation Eagle Scout, raised in Amarillo and Austin, and then had the great good fortune after law school to be selected to clerk at the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington, where I met my wife, Erin, who was a law clerk the same year. So it was a wonderful year, both personally and professionally for me, to have a chance to serve in D.C. And much like Judge Uri had changed my life, I thought I was going to be a tax lawyer going in, and I came out wanting to be an appellate lawyer. But actually, the reason I wanted to be a tax lawyer is because that's what my mom did. She was the only woman to graduate in her law school class from St. Mary's in 1971 and couldn't get a job. And it was through sheer determination and outworking everybody that she came around that she built a successful career. So she was my inspiration to go to law school. But I did find my calling in appellate work. I've been doing that for 20 years now. I'm board certified in civil appellate law. Also made my home in Houston, built a very successful appellate practice there, was named one of the top 100 lawyers in Texas in 2012, and was recently selected by my peers, the civil appellate lawyers in the state, to chair the State Bar Appellate Section. So this has been my whole career, arguing cases in front of the court, and then I served for 6 years on the Court of Appeals in Houston, much like the work that Judge Evans and Judge Whitehill do here in Dallas. That was my work for 6 years on the Court of Appeals in Houston. Before that, I was a Republican precinct chair and helping get our Republican candidates elected in Houston. And so I was appointed by Governor Perry to that court, won election in 2012, and then I was swept out in 2018 along with Justice Evans and every other Republican incumbent in all of the big metro districts in the whole state because of straight ticket voting. And so as I was praying about what to do next, one of my predecessors on the Supreme Court resigned, and there was a vacancy. And so I applied to Governor Abbott and was very honored to be selected for that position. And so I've got the experience to do this job because I argued cases in front of the Supreme Court when I was in private practice. And I'm actually the only justice on the court that had a private appellate practice. And that allows me not only to know to have the same view that's been shared with many of you, which I won't go into in detail, but very firmly hold to. I understand what the job of a judge is and what it's not. I understand that I am there to apply the law fairly to every case that comes before me, not to make a personal policy decision or a political decision in the cases that come before me, so that everybody is treated equally according to the law and you get the same outcome if you have the same facts anywhere in the state. And that's one of the things that's important to me now serving on our Supreme Court, to be sure that the law is settled and predictable across the whole state, so that if you're supposed to win, you will win that case under the law, whether it's in Texarkana or in El Paso or in Dallas or in Houston or wherever you may be, so that everybody gets that same equal treatment under the law. So that's, I'm very honored to do that work. One of the things that you can learn about judges and sharing with your friends and judicial candidates is we all get rated, especially in the big cities, in bar polls. And lawyers can vote anonymously on whether we're doing good work or not. And so I would just urge you to look at the bar polls of the people who are running. I've been honored to be one of the highest rated appellate judges in the state for many years in polls. I was named the Appellate Judge of the Year by the Texas Association of Civil Trial and Appellate Specialists in 2018. Let me tell you a little bit about my opponent. She's a long-time, very liberal district judge in Austin, in Travis County. She was the worst-rated civil trial judge 2 years in a row in the last 2 polls. And you can look up the qualifications of all the folks that are running for the Supreme Court this time. We've got 4 seats up, 4 out of 9. So the Democrats are coming for these seats, and they're running their least qualified, most ideological candidates for these seats. Check them any of them out. I don't have time to give you the rundown on all of them. But if you look at my opponent's website, it looks like she's running for the state legislature. She says she wants to bring a different view to the court on issues like social justice, a clean environment, health care for all. And that is not what we want on our Supreme Court. We want people who are going to apply the law fairly to everybody who comes before the court and not bring a political agenda. So we need your help to do that. I have some materials in the back also. I really appreciate Judge Uri's suggestion. Take a picture of our push card, find us on social media. I'm on Facebook and Twitter. Please help us spread the word, because a lot of people don't know what we do. They don't know what our qualifications are. They don't know what our opponents are trying to do to the legal system. And they don't know how bad it will be if we go back to the 80s that Justice Whitehill was talking about, where we had businesses and fleeing the state in droves because we didn't have a legal system you could depend on, and that you knew what the answer was going to be, and that the judges would follow the law. So we need your help for that. I'd be so honored to have your vote. I want to thank Park City's Republican Women for donating to my campaign. That helps me reach a lot more folks. I'm very grateful for that. So I'm here to say thank you and to ask for your vote, and to ask you to tell your friends and neighbors to help us and vote Republican in these races. Thank you so much.
Hello. Thank you. Can you hear me? This is sort of Curtis. I get to go last, which means I have the least amount of time of anyone. So let me start by telling you where I went to kindergarten. My name is David Newell. I'm a judge on the Court of Criminal Appeals, as well as Judge Uri and Judge Richardson. I'm not going to, a lot of things have been said already. I certainly agree with everything that everyone said about why judges are important and what makes judges important. I believe that we should interpret the law fairly and equally. I believe that we should interpret the text of statutes according to their text. We should interpret the Constitution according to the words of the Constitution and the original meaning of the framers. I have the background that has led me to this, just even as a practical matter. One of the things I think I haven't heard is that I guess I can make a secular, non-ideological argument why this is good. One of the things I've noticed as a judge is that we don't have we're not built to do the kinds of things that legislatures can do. Like that's the reason we don't legislate from the bench. It's not just ideology. We can't bring people in and have hearings and get the perspective from folks in Amarillo and folks in in Longview. We can't do that. It just doesn't work. We do our best to try and answer the cases in front of us as best we can, and I believe, because I believe that if you do that well, it echoes into the next case, and it really does. If you really strive to do that one case really, really well, you strive to apply the law fairly and impartially, it's going to create better law. It's going to create consistent law. Just to give you a little bit of background about who I am, so I did go to college in elementary, but I'll fast forward all the way to college. I went to the University of Houston. I was never going to be a lawyer. I went there to be a writer. I went to get an English degree. And about towards the end of my career in college, a good friend of mine was sexually assaulted. And my family raised me to be helpful. They taught me to be dutiful and serve other people. And so I wanted to help my friend. And I didn't know how to communicate with her. I didn't know any of those things. So I volunteered answering the Red Cross's hotline at the Houston Area Women's Center. And it really was one of those transformative experiences, not just because it taught me different skills on how to listen, but it also helped me realize being an English professor was not going to help a lot of people. Well, I mean, it's a worthwhile. I don't not criticizing English professors. Okay, it's great. I like your accents as well. But no, I realized that I could make a bigger impact if I went to law school and became a prosecutor, and that's what I did. I went to be a prosecutor. And then I came right back home. I grew up in Fort Bend County, just outside of Houston, in Sugar Land, and I went to work at the Fort Bend County DA's office. I started as a line prosecutor in smaller counties. You do everything. I handled the docket. That's an important point about that is my opponent is making a big deal about his trial experience because he has no appellate experience. Well, I have trial experience. I'm just, I'm better suited to appeals. I did trials and tried felonies and tried misdemeanors, just not as many as my opponent did. I got a broad overview of the entire system actually by what I did. But in my spare time, I actually did appeals because I'm gifted in writing. And so I helped my office out that way, and they eventually liked what I was doing so much, they created an appellate prosecutor position for me. And so I was there in Fort Bend for about 10 years, and I went to the Harris County DA's office for another 7 to be an appellate prosecutor as well. And during that time, I became board certified in criminal law, which you only do with trial experience, but I also became board certified in criminal appellate law. I'm the only member of our court that has that distinction. And in fact, that puts me in the category of like 0.02% of the attorneys in Texas that can say that. That's a really big deal. Well, as Judge Erie mentioned, there were 3 judges. There were 3 judges decided they were going to step down in 2015. And so I did what any rational person would do. I tried to get my boss to run in Harris County, and he said no. But I realized there was an opportunity, and I felt like, well, someone should step up, and I believe that we want to make sure we have good quality judges who are qualified and experienced to run. And so I put myself to the hazard, and that's what I did. I was lucky enough to win. And I've been serving you now for almost 6 years on the Court of Criminal Appeals. Just not to belabor on my opponent, he has a lot to be proud of with regard to his trial record in Dallas County, but he has no appellate experience. And so that's what you need in this job. You need someone who has criminal appellate experience because it's in the title of the job, Court of Criminal Appeals. And so I have criminal appeals that I've worked on. And I've actually worked on any kind of criminal appeal. I actually also was lucky enough to, I had one case where we did a briefing, we briefed a case that went to the United States Supreme Court, a case called Salinas versus Texas, and I wrote the part of the brief that the court had actually adopted. So I could go on and on and on because, we're running late. That's what you do when you're running late. So check me out. My website is keepjudgenewell.com. It's really simple. Thank you all so much for having, all of us, thank you for having me. Thank you, Park City Republican Women, for donating my campaign. We don't have, on the Court of Criminal Appeals, money. We don't get anyone, a lot of people don't even know our court exists, okay? And it's one of the highest courts in Texas. And so for you all to invite me here, to donate to my campaign, to donate to Judge Richardson, it means a great deal. So I cannot thank you from the bottom of my heart to invite us here to come talk. I can't thank you enough for your support. And again, just to emphasize, we need you to talk to your friends and family. That's the most effective way to get people to vote for a judicial candidate is to give them that personal recommendation. So thank you all so much for your time. Any questions? Questions?
Where is the Court of Criminal Appeals physically located?
It's across the hall from the Supreme Court of Texas. Actually, our offices are one floor in Austin.
That's what I thought.
It's one floor below from that.
Take a 9-hour shot from the state capitol to the northwest of there.
I've got a question. The narrative this spring has been that people of color are unfairly identified in every step of the judicial process, and I would be interested in your thoughts about that narrative.
What's the question?
The narrative this spring is that people of color are unfairly identified in all phases of the judicial system, and I would like to get their perspective.
I'm gonna walk delicately through it though. As far as the appellate courts are concerned,
Because I probably won't.
at least as far as the appellate courts are concerned, we don't really see, the people involved. So we could very well, in most of the cases, dispose of a matter without knowing whether that person is a person of color or a white person. You know what I'm saying? We just don't know. We have names in front of us. We have facts. We have words. We deal in words, not actual people most of the time. Sometimes we unfortunately have, at least Judge Newell and I have the unfortunate obligation to view photographs and videos of crimes being committed, and that in those circumstances we might encounter the race or ethnicity of a person, but it plays no role in what we do. I can assure you that. So.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's the same for the cases that we have, but I'll say another thing that we do on the Supreme Court is in conjunction with the Court of Criminal Appeals, we also oversee the judicial system, and each of us has different responsibilities in that regard. And one of the ones that I have is I'm one of the liaisons for the Texas Access to Justice Commission, and one of the things that we do there is to try to help people of limited means, of whatever ethnicity, be sure that they can get their business done fairly in court if they can't afford a lawyer. And so, you know, that's something that's very important to me personally. I donated a lot of time when I was in private practice to people who couldn't afford a lawyer and really needed help in the legal system. This is a particular problem in family law cases, as Judge Wysocki knows, because a lot of people are unrepresented, and it's very difficult for them to navigate the court system without a lawyer. And so some of the things we're doing there to help people include, you know, trying to encourage lawyers to volunteer, breaking down barriers that are in the laws and regulations to make that easier for lawyers to do, and then also helping with forms and things like that, so that if somebody doesn't have a lawyer, they have information that they can go to get their business done in the court in a fair way. So, you know, I think we're doing the best that, always looking for areas where we can improve on that, so that we eliminate any sort of impacts that are, you know, that may be barriers for folks of whatever ethnicity to be sure that they can get justice from our courts.
I would just add, and I think I don't want to be too presumptuous, but I think that every judge here would agree with this. We take an oath to uphold the Constitution and laws of the state and laws of the United States. Basic decision on color would violate those oaths. We absolutely take an oath to apply law equally, fairly, and impartially, regardless of the color of someone's skin, and we don't make decisions in that way. I can give you a little anecdote just to tell you exactly how far removed Judge Erie is correct, and how far removed we are from knowing these things. We just recently had a case that got published in the paper, and the defendant was a defendant that actually, when I was a prosecutor in Houston, as a appellate prosecutor, I handled his appeal. Okay? And so because he filed a post-conviction writ in the Court of Criminal Appeals, I couldn't participate. And he wasn't denied relief immediately. We broke for the summer, and he started arguing that it was based on race. That the reason why the court did it was based on race. And it was at that moment, I didn't participate in the whole thing because I couldn't, so the only thing I heard about was the argument, and it was in the moment it came out of the paper, I was going, that's what his race was? I had no idea. I had been through this with this defendant for a little bit of a time. So we really just we don't look for it. It's just not something that ever really comes. The only color we see really is the color of the paper that our draft opinions are written on, which is a weird thing about the Court of Criminal Appeals. Each judge has their own color, and we do hard copies of these, so I know who's got, this is a yellow one, this comes from Judge Erie. This was Mocha, it comes from Dave Newell. And
I just want to say that my color is canary, brave canary. It's yellow.
So, but yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. We just don't, it's just not something that ever factors into what we do.
So I just want to say a personal thank you to each one of you and for what you do and your service to the courts. I mean, we are truly, truly blessed to have men and women who serve on the bench, who don't legislate from the bench, but they interpret the law, they take the oath of office seriously, and we have got, as the justices have said, I'm so sick and tired of my friends saying, well, I'm not going to vote for that judge or that justice because I don't know them. Well, I do, and I'm telling you that you have to vote for these people because they follow the rule of law, and we have heard what we've heard tonight. And so I also want to mention to you that we recorded this. Thank you, Natalie Butler, who just happens to be a lawyer herself, for recording this. So So we want your friends to look at this, and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. But another thing that I want to say is we don't normally run this long, but those of you who stayed, I think you are very enlightened now, and even more so than those who might have had another commitment and had to leave. I don't want you to leave just yet, because Tammy, make your way up here. All politics start locally. And to Chris's comment about what's going on with defunding the Dallas police and things that are going on. So at 7:30 this morning, we were texting one another. So I just want to bring her up here. And so I want to say thank you again. The justices and the judges will be here. So please don't leave, because we want you to talk to them. We want you to pick up their materials. I also want you, remember what I said, you've got to walk out here with this wonderful list of all of these things that are coming up. But I want to introduce you to Tammy Brown Rodriguez, who was appointed to the Dallas Community Police Oversight Board. And she is going to enlighten us on what's going on with whether or not the City Council is going to defund or defend the Dallas Police. So please stay, because this is going to be worth your while. I want you all to hear what's going on, and she's gonna tell you. So
thank you so much. And I do want to thank all of you for staying a little bit later.